Welcome, everybody, to Navigating Change, the podcast from Tybal Inc. I'm Pete Wright, joined, as always, by Howard Tybal, the one, the only.
I'm here. I just paused to see if you got nervous for half a second. Did it work?
I'm blue steel, Howard. I never get nervous.
God, it's never going to work.
We are joined by another fantastic guest, Randy Gentzler, Vice President for Finance and Treasurer for Loyola University, Maryland. Randy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
The root of this conversation begins in a project that Howard was involved in that is, I understand, ongoing, a project that you undertook to undercover key ways to save at Loyola. The project is I think it's a long story, an interesting story, and one that is worth dissecting a little bit to see what the real value is in this administrative review process. Howard, do you want to kick us off and talk about a little bit about how you got involved, and we'll let you kind of drive the conversation here with Randy.
One of my reason I'm excited about having Randy on the show is because I think that what you did, Randy, and what the team did and the co-leads, and we can talk a little bit about some of the specifics, really is best practice. And it's an example of doing certain things that really worked around an administrative and academic review that is intended to make room for more investment, but also produce broad campus buy-in, which is so hard to do because of the nature of all the different constituents. So, what I want to have us talk about, Randy, and have you share a little bit about is some of the things that we did in this project that really contributed to sort of getting a sense by the community that we're being inclusive, but that it also contributed to this financial sustainability question that I think that's on every business officer's mind. So, maybe just to start off, just say a little bit about when you got there and this conversation started. How did you get into this project, and just sort of say a little bit about it, and then we can sort of get into some of the best practices.
I've just completed my third year as Vice President of Finance at Loyola University, and when I arrived, began to take a look at the financial underpinning of the institution, looking at our price point, looking at where we are and where our budgets were positioned in order to advance the strategic initiatives of the university. And with the pressures, external pressures on pricing, the increased pressures of affordability and financial aid costs, we really had a budget in place at the university that was not sustainable, and we had a shortfall that needed to be addressed. So we need to look for a way of approaching it that we could accomplish all that we had in place from a strategic initiative and planning standpoint, and things we wanted to accomplish, and how do we get there. So we really embarked upon what we're referring to as Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1 was a shorter process that involved looking for low-hanging fruit to balance the upcoming year budget. But then Phase 2, which was a longer phase project, estimated at 18-month plus, which we called the new way of proceeding. And I think the success behind that was the structure, the communications, the transparency, and the various things that we put in place that really, provided the basis for a successful program. And among that was selecting as co-chairs the chair of the Faculty Senate and then also our Vice President of Administration. They co-chaired the project. And then as CFO or Vice President of Finance, they kept me at another level within the process. The transparency was great. All the processes, the recommendations flowed through the governance models of the university up to the president. So there was a lot of vetting and a lot of conversation throughout the year regarding the various recommendations that took place.
Whenever you invite in an outsider into the conversation, especially if, we wear those, this special wingtip shoes and our shirts are all pressed nice, we're clearly the consultant in the room. There was this healthy skepticism around having an external person help us. And I think we really went through 2 go-arounds before the larger cabinet got a sense of, we know how to partner with Tybal Inc. And I can tell you, Randy, that one of the strengths, I think, and I'd love to get your perspective on this institution understood how to use us and how to not use us. And that, usually I'm in a position where I'm always saying the ownership has to live internally. I can't tell you the number of times, Pete, and you know this too, Randy, where it was encouraged for me to be in the background. And I think that as much as that's hard for me, because Randy, how much it's hard for me just to sit still, let alone not go up to a whiteboard, how much value there was for me to learn that what it really means for the institution to take the leadership role, but to use us appropriately. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
No, I think that was a really part of this process that allowed it to be successful. I think early on, as we were developing the framework of how we envisioned this phase 2 rolling out, I think the phase 2 task force really identified very early on that they wanted to be the person in the forefront. They wanted to be the committee that was seen as the group, controlling the process. And I think having you, Howard, working very closely with the task force and behind the scenes, I think empowered that task force and allowed for them to report out to the campus community on a regular basis.
When and Randy, you may not know, I'm a faculty member at a university, and one of the first things that strikes me when I think about this project is how interesting it is to have finance guidance, have financially minded changes implemented, not coming from the mouth of a finance guy, right? It is so easy, and we have this knee-jerk reaction to say, well, of course they want to cut this program. They're the finance people, right? And so that's the sort of cultural resonance of this piece that I think is so fascinating, is taking this apart and really leveraging more of the whole sort of whole administrative sort of university culture around it.
Yeah, and I think it's going back to the beginning of the process. I think what was important is I made sure that the task force understood the need to look for cost savings. I spent time with them explaining the budget, why we're having a shortfall, what the shortfall amounts were, and the importance of hitting our milestones, and the milestone being getting to a point where we can have a FY15 balanced budget. And then throughout the year, from a financial officer's position, making sure they're aware of the timelines, the need, and the importance of making decisions and making sure that those decisions were being made in a timely way to impact the budget process.
I think probably is what's for other business officers who might be listening to this, part of what I think you did here and what the institution did is by opening this up. Again, we had probably over 100 people on 10 project teams working over an extended period of time and reporting out. This was not a trivial, and this is on top of their day jobs.
Wow, that's a scale. I think it might have been useful to open with that.
Yeah. So, but here's what's interesting about it. People were nominated by the president's office. They got to contribute in a way that typically they're not being asked. I think the typical being asked to be on a committee, it's a sense of burden. This is different, and I think that what I learned so much on this, taking forward to other institutions, Randy, and how to do this in a way that really does honor people's time, but at the same time recognizes that this is a way for them to give back and be even more connected to the mission. And what it demands of is a business officer who is willing to step back and give up some control. And I can tell you that, because you as former president of ICUBO and your leadership role in the association, I know the changes that business officers are going through today. And I think that what you did at Loyola was a demonstration of how to lead in a way that's broader than just being the numbers guy.
Is it public how much you saved in these initial 2 phases, or do you have kind of a ballpark number that you discovered and were able to kind of implement changes, or is that something that's not public at this point?
Well, I don't. We began the budgeting process with about a $5 million budget gap. So our goal throughout the year was to identify cost savings or reallocations that would allow us to close that gap in time for the start of the FY15 budget year. But some of the reductions we made included workforce reduction. We reduced our retirement contribution by 2%. We made some other pretty significant changes to the university, and in a way that we brought forth all those changes through the governance, and they were well received. Again, I mean, were individuals disappointed, or was it? I don't want to underplay the significance of the adjustments we made,
sure,
and the impact it had on individuals on our campus. But for the most part, people step up to the plate, and another important part of this process was, the president, when we began this process in his State of the University address, had indicated, some of the things that we needed to do as a university in order to remain strong and competitive in this, higher ed industry. And he communicated regularly throughout the process, and it was all with a common theme and a common need of what we're doing and why we need to do it. And so that was also a big part of the program.
Randy, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I remember first seeing, whether it was his convocation, President Linnane's sort of telling the story of what the new way of proceeding means. And, and that the project very much was about putting meat on the bones around that, right? There was a concept about, what does it mean to retain the core principles of a Jesuit education and a Jesuit institution while bringing change. And let's not lose sight of how important that is. Again, another example of leadership from the top, having a vision and then turning it over to their people to then say, all right, here's my vision. I'm going to let you guys figure out, and women, how do you want to actually move this thing? And the fact that there was very little, at least from talking to you and the co-chairs, very little negativity, which is basically rare. It's not that everyone loved the choices that were made, but I think in the end, you did it in a way that allowed people, think about comp and benefits, think about workforce reduction. Those are really tough conversations to have. But I think because it was inclusive, people felt like they were being treated as adults. I can tell you the biggest problem I see in instituting change on campuses is that this idea of transparency is really about involve us, we can handle it, give us the good and the bad news, and we will help you through it. And I think the old model that institutions, some are still holding on to it, but I think Loyola demonstrated we're going to open the story up. We're going to tell you what some of the brutal facts. We're going to have a vision from the top, and then I'm going to let you all loose to figure out how to do it. And I got to tell you, Randy, it was one of the more satisfying projects to be involved on. Working with you, of course, because how is it not satisfying hanging out with you? You can tell, Randy is just Randy. Oh my God. Randy, I have a great time. But the culture there went from, Pete, it was so interesting. Initially, rightful skepticism, what are we really doing here, to embracing it in a way and embracing our involvement in a way that I haven't sort of seen at that level in a very long time. So I got to tell you, I continue to appreciate the fact that you found a way to bring us into this, Randy, because it really was a satisfying experience.
Well, it was satisfying, and it was also very successful. And I just, will point out, you mentioned about, the reduction of force, the retirement reduction. Many schools will struggle over those changes that take several years. And for us, because it went through the new way of proceeding task force, the ad hoc groups, and those were recommendations that came out of these ad hoc groups that were made up of faculty, staff, administrators. They were recommendations. So basically, when they came up through the governance model, those recommendations were supported. It went to the president, and all these decisions, the president had the final say on whether or not he accepted or rejected the recommendations. But all of those were recommendations that were accepted by the president that came through the governance model and through these committees. So, made up of a cross section of the university. So it was very powerful, the way it played out and what we were able to accomplish in a positive way, because we knew that we need to look for structural changes that are going to allow us to remain competitive and invest in our strategic future. And we're able to do that. We just finished probably one of the best fiscal year ends, and our enrollments for fall are above budget. So we're doing well, and I think repositioning our finances to have a system in place that allows us to balance our budgets and move forward is very powerful.
But powerful is right.
I mean, think about how much negativity is out there. And, there's a lot of, let's say bad news. There's a lot of tough news out there.
Right.
If you read the Chronicle or Inside Higher Education. To me, this is an example of the kind of optimism and positive energy that I think carries the day.
I think so too. I cannot get over the fact that this is a financial project that has changed the fabric of the culture of the institution. That is
or
an
changing.
Extremely,
Let's be
changing.
clear.
Oh, that's
changing.
fair. That's fair.
Yeah, exactly.
We got to wrap it up. We could talk about this all day, but we got to wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Randy's got to go back to work.
He does. He's clearly got a
time out.
Wow.
He's got a lot to do.
What time's the golf game today, Randy?
Actually, Howard, we're doing a bond issue, and pre-pricing is in the morning, and so we're hoping to take advantage of some savings for the university by advanced refunding. So we're every day is a new adventure, but
he never stops, Randy. He never stops. He's always on something else.
Randy Gentzler, Vice President for Finance and Treasurer, Loyola University, Maryland. Thank you so much for joining us, Randy. We so appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And the opportunity was fantastic. Thank you.
Excellent. And Howard Teibel, thank you as ever for your wisdom always.
Well, I think it goes both ways, and the wisdom really comes from the people that we bring on this.
Truly.
It inspires me to keep going. So
absolutely,
it's awesome.
It does. Looking forward to this continuing, hearing more about this story. We're going to keep talking about this a little bit from some different angles. Very much looking forward to this. So come back next week. Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc. You can find us at TeibelInc.com. You can subscribe for free in iTunes or your podcatcher of choice. And again, on behalf of Howard Teibel, Randy Gentzler, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next week on Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc.